Beep is one of, if not the most beloved characters in all of Kenshi, and for good reason. This guy has some of the most unique dialogue in the entire game. With his sassy quotes and overinflated ego, it's not hard to see why he's so well loved. When Beep first joins your group, he's about as useful as a TikToker is to the job market. Not very. Beep starts off with only 1 in basically every stat, but a popular challenge in the Kenshi community is to transform Beep from the useless gremlin he starts out as and turn him into a based, red-pilled Sigma male Giga Chad, through leveling him and giving him cybernetic enhancements. So today I'm going to do just that. Along the way, Beep will be pushed to his limits. He'll either come out on the other end as a changed man, or dead. You might have noticed that Beep's looking a lot more swole than in the last video. Allow me to explain. After the morally and legally ambiguous pursuits in my last video, the influx of cash has meant that my squad could afford a home gym for Beep, where he spent the last few weeks transforming himself into the beefy bugman you see before you. A surplus of bread and beak thing meat has meant that Beep has been able to snack to his heart's content. Additionally, creatine and trembolone shipments from Squin have given Beep the competitive edge he needs in order to shape himself into a Greek god. Miraculously though, despite his gigantic stature, Beep is still insanely weak. Luckily, there's one place on the map which I knew would really transform Beep into the man he's meant to be. That place being the infamous Holy Nation slave camp, Rebirth. Gathering some basic supplies and food, I let Beep say his goodbyes before heading out the base, excited for what this mysterious Rebirth held for him. As the sun began to set, I sent Beep to the Smugglers Inn to sleep, ready for an early start. The next morning I left the bar, and was immediately attacked by 2 beak things. Realizing I couldn't take them on alone, I fled to the safety of Venge, where I came dangerously close to being fried alive, before being chased away by a horde of skeletons.
Why are you running? Why are you
Suffering from some substantial damage, I headed to the way station, where I healed Beep's wounds and waited for the sun to rise again. The following day played out more or less the same, with Beep being chased down by a truly f***ed creature. Thanks to Beep's stupid little stick legs, he was able to outrun the skimmer, and finally reached the base of the mountain range where Rebirth was located. I set up Beep's 3rd and final camp, and waited till morning. The next morning, after travelling the final stretch up the mountain, Beep came to an overlook, where he finally had a chance to see Rebirth. Daunted by the sights of humans making Hivers and Shek perform forced labour, Beep became slightly concerned, and somewhat anxious.
Welcome to the rice fields, motherfucker!
But he was sure he had just gotten the wrong end of the stick, and was misinterpreting the situation. And so he continued to the entrance of the camp, where he was brutally beaten and dragged inside. Beep's remaining optimism was now rapidly draining, and he began to feel just a little bit worried.
Problem, conductor!
Awakening a few hours later, Beep found himself in a metal cage, where the reality of his unforeseeably long stay was beginning to set in. The first step of the plan was now in action. Make Beep lose all his limbs.
Now stand aside, worthy adversary.
'Tis but a scratch.
However, being the 12 IQ brainlet I am, I realised I hadn't taken into account how I would replace his limbs once inside Rebirth. So, I thought up a solution. I would take a member of my squad and have them bring him a backpack full of robotic limbs into Rebirth. I knew I wanted Beep to have some top-of-the-line limbs, but I didn't know where to find them, and so I assumed that the Black Desert City would stock some decent robotics due to the large skeleton population. I took Molly into a surrounding workshop, killed a few skeletons, stole some ancient research and engineering research to upgrade my base with, and carried back a dying skeleton. Once back, I used the research to develop new stuff for my base, and converted the skeleton to a member of my squad. I named him Clunkatron, and wasted no time sending him to Black Desert City. Once there, I had a look around, realizing that I had arrived in probably the most depressing city in the game. I also realized that it was not hostile towards humans, and could have sent any other character here in the first place. Regardless, I grabbed a few limbs with high stats. With everything I needed, I sent Clunkatron off to deliver the goods to Beep. Back inside Rebirth, I found Beep performing his silly little slave chores, and immediately sent him to beat up another prisoner in order to quickly assert dominance. The guards were not a fan of this, and decided to beat me up. Unsurprisingly, Beep went down like a pensioner's penis in a marital bed. But with the help of some martial arts training, Beep was gradually able to level his fighting skill. Wasting no time, I made sure that when Beep wasn't unconscious, he was busy fighting the guards. Despite slow progress, Beep eventually reached a point where he was able to take on a few guards at a time. With his grueling training routine, it wasn't long before one of the guards cleaved off Beep's legs, and not a moment too soon, as Clunkatron edged closer to the entrance of Rebirth. Receiving the standard Rebirth welcome, Clunkatron was immediately beaten up and dragged inside. I dropped the backpack off and left it ready for Beep to collect. With a collection of top-of-the-line artificial limbs at his disposal, it meant that every limb the Holy Nation chopped off, Beep would come back stronger. Soon the tides began to turn against the prison guards, as Beep began his transformation into Cyber Beep. Before long, I lost my other leg, along with my left arm. While a lesser man may have given up at this stage, Beep's near godlike power only grew. There was just one small problem: food. The food which I had loaded my backpack up with was beginning to run out, and Beep was getting hungry.
I could go for a barbecue bacon burger, and a large order of fries, and orange soda with no ice, and a piece of hot apple pie.
While I managed to temporarily stave off the issue by breaking into one of the towers and stealing food cubes, this method, more often than not, resulted in Beep getting caught before he could steal anything substantial, and definitely wasn't sustainable. Not only that, but I received a notification informing me that Clunkatron had died. But it gets worse. Before I had time to even think of a way to get Beep more food, or even mourn the loss of Clunkatron, I got a notification telling me that the Holy Nation was sending a Retribution of God party to my base. While I didn't exactly know what this involved, I could assume by the name it probably wasn't good. I quickly upgraded my turrets and prepared for the onslaught. Just one problem. I noticed that the squad members I had signed to turret guards simply hadn't shown up to work, leaving my engineers struggling to repair the gate before the party broke through. Large-scale fighting broke out as more and more members of my squad rushed to the front lines to fight. Apart from Molly and a few others who were managing to hold their own, most of my squad were getting utterly stomped. Once one fell, the others followed, and one by one, my squad was wiped out. Thankfully, the Holy Nation decided that our limp, unconscious bodies weren't a threat to them, and cleared out of my base, leaving a scattering of my smushed characters. This is where I would realise my greatest mistake. Time was now running short as I rushed to provide first aid to members of my squad who were close to death. However, I noticed I hadn't given any medkits to any but a few squad mates, which created a logistical nightmare, trying to heal characters the most efficient way before one of them died. A bit before the fight, I had considered upping the first aid kit production so that every member of my squad would have at least 2 kits at all times. But this meant taking the fabrics which would be used to craft crab armor and instead using them for first aid kits. You might be wondering why I can just split the fabric supply between the first aid and crab armor production. Well, let's just move on. The crushing impact of my horrendous managerial choices set in as I saw the first dreaded notification that one of my squad members had died. It wasn't long before the rest started falling. Things weren't much better at Rebirth, where Beep was now feeling the full effect of his hunger, and his fighting ability took a sharp fall. Luckily, throughout my many fights with Rebirth's guards, the Shek woman had now fully joined my squad.
Good evening, Kerry, you fit blonde.
Which gave me an idea. I'd wait until night, free a load of other prisoners, and sneak out the base through the front exit.
We pray at night, we stalk at night. We're the rat.
The plan seemed foolproof until we were crossing the bridge, ready to head to the front of the camp, and I was struck by just how low Beep and the rest of the group's sneak ability was. We were immediately spotted, and within what felt like seconds, we were beaten up by the guards and sent back to our cells. I was genuinely stumped. I hadn't expected Beep's high martial arts ability to suffer so drastically, just from being a little bit hungry. My only options seemed to be to switch from training martial arts to sneaking. While my sneaking skill did level bizarrely fast just from loitering creepily around the back of random towers, it didn't seem like any of the training I was doing had been paying off, as Beep would still get spotted almost immediately, probably because of his rusty little legs. What little hope was left now seemed to be fading. I'd entered Rebirth expecting to turn Beep into a professional MMA fighter, but what I was given was a starving locust on stilts. I was wondering how things might have been different if I had even just a handful of some characters with similar or better combat abilities. Would I have been able to take over the entire camp and wipe it out? I only had one way to find out, which is why I took my entire squad, made them traverse almost the whole map to reach Rebirth, set up camp and hired a group of mercenaries, all in order to fight the guards. Using Molly, I baited a few out from the entrance, and then ambushed them with my full army of chairs. Meanwhile, I sent Shira, Shunthole and a few others to knock out the turret guards. With the gate forces scattered and overwhelmed, I was able to easily penetrate the defences. Once inside, we went from building to building, wiping out any guards inside before heading over to the next gate and continuing inside the base. We continued on down the main area of the camp, but we reunited with Beep once again. With his ungodly power now returning to him due to access to food, we were utterly unstoppable, and managed to wipe through the camp with underwhelming ease, either killing the guards fully or knocking them out and chaining them to their own prisoner poles, all the while freeing the many prisoners trapped inside, including Clunkatron's body. With more or less every guard defeated, we checked through every house, took out any stragglers, looted all that we could, and left. With Beep freed and our job complete, I marched our army out of Rebirth, before selecting the absolute cream of the crop chads and sent them back to finish off the remaining guards.
Oh, fuck, I can't believe you've done this.
Now that Rebirth was wiped out, we made our final exit of the base. Before continuing, I paid my respects by placing Clunkatron on a hill, left him to be found by bandits, sold for scrap. Rest in peace, you sweet angel. I'd reached the point I had wanted to get to since the start of my Kenshi save. My squad was now capable of wiping out more or less every settlement on the map, but picking up more recruits and hiring mercenary bodyguards for future fights still seemed like a smart choice, just to hedge my bets. But generally, everything was looking good. I'm aware that areas like the Ashlands and more boss fight tier characters may be a struggle, but it seemed like things were generally turning my way, especially now with a massively OP cyber beat. It was beginning to seem near impossible to lose fights. Starvation and money were now my biggest problems. We still have about 500,000 from the cheeky exploits in my last videos, which will last us for a while, and generally, keeping a few backpacks full of food cubes seemed to last a surprisingly long duration of time, so we're all good on that front. All seemed good. But with broadened horizons, I set my sight on a bigger foe, the Slavers, and more importantly, Emperor Tengu.
Sir, I've just received a report from Heng. It's those virgins again. They've taken Rebirth, and we've heard word that they're heading back out east. What should we do?
Bring me a delicious steak. Sommelier. And my sword. We're going to act.
Want a break from the ads?